evening, all. My name's Mike Gafford. I'm the hatchery manager at Big Thomas Hatchery in Brookneal. Where's Brookneal?
Can't get that from here.
Yeah. This is Lauren. She's a technician that works at the hatchery too. So just want to thank you for allowing us to speak and try to explain what we do, how we do it. We won't go in a whole lot of detail. We'll keep it at a 30 or 60,000 foot level. But if you've got questions, we'll do our best to answer. So you as a stakeholder, you're my boss. Okay? I come from the private sector. I've been with the agency for 7 years. So just to let you know what my perspective is, you are my boss. So I work for y'all. So with that, my background, I'm going on over 40 years in hatchery experience. Most all of it's in stripers. West Coast, Mississippi Delta, and then out here. So a little bit of background. So with that, we did a couple of YouTube videos, and you can go onto YouTube and enter Virginia DWR, and there's a ton of videos out there for y'all to look at. We've even got one on walleye production, which was pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is play 2 videos for you, get out of the way, let y'all enjoy that, and then Lauren's going to come back and talk a little bit about the importance of some of the fine things we do in the hatchery that allows us to produce the fish. So.
All right. So where we go?
They're only a few minutes long, so it's not very long.
Today we'll be talking about our striped bass fisheries in Virginia, specifically about the fishery of Bugs Island Lake. Bugs Island Lake striped bass do naturally reproduce, but we have to supplementally stock them. We're going to be talking with Mike Gafford about how he does that at the Big Thomas Hatchery in Brookneal.
Here at the hatchery, we focus on striped bass and walleye, but today we're going to talk about striped bass production. The production here at Big Thomas Hatchery goes to Bugs Island, Leesville, and Smith Mountain Lake.
Striped bass have a pelagic egg, which means it floats freely in the water column. This stretch of the Stanton River, which flows into Carr Reservoir, is one of the few areas in the United States in which we will find natural reproducing striped bass. But it's important for us to supplement that natural population in Bugs Island Carr Reservoir with fairleys that we produce here at the hatchery. That way we ensure that the anglers have access to catchable fish and that population is sustainable. The striped bass broodstock are collected from the Stanton River with the assistance of the aquatic teams. Those fish are collected using a technique called electrofishing, which does not cause harm to the fish. The fish are brought up into the hatchery. They are paired up, males and females, into spawning tanks. We normally use 1 female in the spawning tank and 3 to 5 males in the spawning tank. The fish will spawn in that spawning tank within normally 24 to 48 hours. Once the fish has spawned in the tank, we will remove both the males and the females and return them back to the river. The eggs are then removed from the spawning tank and placed into incubation chambers, which we call McDonald jars. The eggs are suspended in the jars for about 44 hours. The larvae hatch out from that, flow into an aquarium or a trough, where we will hold those for somewhere between 3 to 5 days, and then they are stocked into a production pond. Our total team during the spawning season will be 6 or 7 people. We work very long hours, a month and a half, 2 months, 7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day. So it requires a fairly large and substantial team to do all the work and provide the husbandry and care for these animals.
Stay tuned for the final video in this series. We'll be talking with the hatchery staff about how they harvest the fingerlings from their ponds and then stock them in the area lakes like Boggs Island. If you'd like more information on the striped bass fisheries in Virginia, please visit our website.
Okay, if we'll go to the next one, please.
Okay.
Was that okay? Yeah. Nice and short and sweet, concise?
Hello, my name is Dan Michaels, and I'm a fisheries biologist with the Department of Wildlife Resources. Today we'll be talking about striped bass management in Virginia. We'll be turning this talk over to Mike Gafford at the Big Thomas Fish Hatchery, where he's going to be talking about the harvest of the fingerling striped bass out of breeding ponds and stocking in the area lakes in Virginia. We're at the tail end of the striped bass production season for 2021. We work in collaboration with King and Queen Fish Hatchery, produce striped bass for stocking in the state borders of Virginia.
One striped bass are hatched in the hatchery at about 3 to 5 days of age. The larvae stocked into earthen ponds. The earthen ponds here at the hatchery are about 4 acres in size. We fertilize those ponds to grow natural zooplankton. After about 30 days, the scales have moved from underneath the skin of the fish to the surface of the fish, which then makes the fish a little more durable for handling. It's that point that we start to drain the pond down. It can take anywhere between 7 to 10 days to drain a pond. The draining process can be very slow and laborious because we want to make sure that the fish are not trapped on the drain screens and causing damage to the skin. We also must be monitoring our temperature to make sure the pond stays fairly cool as the pond drains down. And so we'll be pumping river water into the pond to cool it down while the pond is still draining. Once we have the pond drained to the point where the fish are falling into the kettle, we'll go into the kettle itself or the catch basin. We'll drag a net through there, take a 2.5 gallon bucket, and we'll pass that bucket up to an awaiting truck. And that awaiting truck has a combination of salt and aloe vera type compound and oxygen. When we have enough fish in that truck from the harvest, we bring them up to the hatchery where they're placed into a raceway. In the raceway, we'll be able to enumerate those fish the next day to go into the receiving bodies of water. During the process of transportation at the hatchery, we'll crowd those up into one end of the raceway, and then we'll dip those out and then enumerate or weigh those fish into a bucket of water, which is then placed onto a waiting transport truck. We put so many fish on the truck that corresponds to what the field biologist is requesting for that lake. We'll drive those to that lake, and once we arrive, we start a tempering process to try to get the water temperature and the water quality to match between the transport truck and the lake. Once the fish have been acclimated, then we'll gently discharge those fish through a pipe and into the lake. And that's a truck stocking. In a pelagic stocking, we'll transfer the fish from the tank into the boat motors out and to a particular area where the field biologist feels it would be the most beneficial, and then we start metering out those fish along this stretch. With the end point is we want the fingerlings to have good survival. We're here to serve the anglers and to enhance the resource to the best of our ability.
For more information on striped bass management in Virginia, please check out our website. We've also had 2 other videos in this series. If you'd like to hear more about how we manage the striped bass fishery and the stocking rates that we set for each of those reservoirs in Virginia. The second video dealt with how we collect fruit stock and how they're actually raised up in the fish hatchery.
Okay. So a couple of videos, pretty concise, keeps your attention, kind of moves along, I hope, and it covers all the fundamentals. One thing I want to touch on is the sensitivity of the
Turn the lights up.
When we're working with a female striped bass, guess how many eggs per pound that female contains? 100,000 per pound. So if you've got a 10-pound fish, if you've got a 20-pound fish, okay. Now, Do you think God intended for all those babies to live? If not, you guys would be walking on striped bass, right? So it gives you an idea when you have in the biological field you call a pelagic dispersal spawner. They produce a ton of eggs, but the survival is very small. We're talking about 1,000% perhaps, okay? Because if not, you'd have striped bass all over the place. And you guys probably wouldn't like catching striped bass because they would consider them trash fish or something like that. So they're very, very sensitive, both in the egg stage, the larval stage, the fingerling stage going out into wherever we're stopping. I cannot overemphasize how sensitive they are, and how, by the grace of God, we get something out there. Because I'm flabbergasted every year that we get anything, and I'm very thankful for that. And that's just how sensitive it is. And what I'd like Lauren to talk about, just very, very briefly, is what she's in charge with in the earthen ponds, and how her job is very important on monitoring what's going on there.
So when he's speaking of that, he's talking about water. So what I do is twice a week, I go go collect, a jar full of water per pond, we have 6 ponds. And I test for ammonia nitrogen and pH alkalinity particles. Those 4 main water parameters are very important, and they need to be balanced. If they're not balanced, if one goes higher than the other, then we either have an excessive algae, which could damage our fish, or if we don't have enough, we don't have enough plankton being spawned out for them to eat. So my job is to monitor those ponds, to make sure those levels are being met, thereby producing what's needed for those fish to grow naturally and learn how to survive in those ponds.
It's a really fine line, what we do. I mean, if we have, Big Thomas Hatchery only has how many ponds?
6.
There you go. We've got 6 ponds in production. Odds are, at least 2 of those are going to give me 0. Okay? 2 of them will give me 0. Hopefully not. Doesn't surprise me if that happens. I may get one pond that gives me 35%. I may get another pond that gives me 10% or 12%. So you can see the flexibility, and I've treated the ponds the same. We're monitoring them the same. But there's something going on that just tweaks it just a little bit, and it either means we're going to have a nice crop or we're going to come up with zeros. I've been doing it a long time. I haven't figured it out. I just say, I am happy to get anything out. So that way I can get a little bit of sleep at night. So it gives you an idea of the sensitivity of the animal and kind of what goes in to making that fingerling to go out to. Let's touch on the stocking. If you appreciate how much blood and sweat and tears goes into that, what do you think my opinion is about the quality of fish going into the lake? I don't take it lightly, do I, Lauren? So, my objective is I would like every single fish that we put on a truck to survive. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. They're so sensitive, we're going to lose a few, okay? I don't like it, but I'm a realist, and I've been doing it long enough to know that it's going to happen. So when I say we lose a few, would you, if I told you 99% survive, would you be happy? Okay, let's do some quick math. I put 25,000 fingerlings on a truck, and 1% die and drown. Now that sounds horrible, doesn't it? Okay, but when you're out there and you say, "Oh my God, look at all those dead fish they put out there." Think back what I just shared with you. That I don't like to lose any. But if I can get my stocking mortality down to a dozen fish, boy, that's payday. Okay? especially if you come from the commercial side, that's payday. So our intention is not to lose a single fish. It's gonna happen, okay? And it's not because we've done something wrong or we don't care. It just happens. So if you're out there watching the stock, you'll see all the care that we take in that. And if you see a few fish, you're just gonna have to say, yeah, they're that darn sensitive. And they're trying really hard, the best that they can to get 100% survival. But we know that on it. We started doing several years ago. I was really pushing Dan to start doing some pelagic stocking. That's where instead of backing up to the boat ramp and putting the light the boat ramp, guess what's at boat ramps? Little baby stripers. How many of y'all are largemouth bass fishermen? You're not gonna raise your hand? You're my worst enemy at the stop.
Shame.
Okay?
Shame.
Chomp, 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 chomp. So how do we get around that? Pelagic stocking. Okay, we get them off of the boat ramp, get them out in the body of water, off of the shore, and give them a chance. So we started doing that, and I think, I'm not gonna get into Dan's business. My business is to grow the fish and get them alive out to where he tells me to put them. But I like pelagic stocking. Okay? I like the dispersal. Who's been on the boat with us when we pelagic stocked? What do you think about that?
It's pretty incredible, and I would say that he is obsessed. He is obsessed
See?
with the activities
Ain't no surprise
that care for those fish. If my 3 boys have been raised in this caring environment, the care for the fish, they'd be better.
Now you know why I've got 2 daughters and one of them's not married yet. So, pelagic stocking, I'm really a proponent of it, and we've been modifying our workboat. We went out and got a very nice boat that we could electrofish with and that we could pelagic fish with. It's my Swiss Army knife boat. Do a lot of different things with it. And we're always modifying that because there's always a better way to do stuff. And so we're working on that. You'll see us doing things, you might say, well, why aren't you doing it like this? Well, I think there's a better way to do it. So we do a lot of that, and I think, my personal opinion is, I think it works. Biologists may not agree with it, but that's okay. I know what they look like when they go in the lake. And how do they look? They're beautiful. They're tough. And believe it or not, when we're trying to get them out of the tank, what do?
Yeah, they fight you, they run the other way, they get away from that current.
I got a 2-inch Honda pump, pumping water in there. If I run the thing 3/4 throttle, it still won't flush them out. Go get right in that pipe and just go like this. And so we have to kind of crowd them to get them out. So it gives you an idea of how strong they are when we get them there and what we're doing. So we do a lot, we're doing pelagic stocking. We'll also do truck stocking in Smith Mountain Lake. The pelagic stocking is still a R&D program, okay? So if you wonder why we might be trying some different things, it's research and development, okay? So we try some things a little different. This year we were blessed with having surplus fingerlings. We had a really good year, didn't we? So the biologist only wants so many fish to go in that system. They cannot overload the system. If you overload the system, you'll crash the system, okay? So we had surplus fish, and I had an option. I could euthanize the fish, and I don't like euthanizing fish. Or we could try to do something a little different. And what we did this year at Big Thomas is we filled up several ponds, and we started growing larger fingerlings, okay? Never been done at Big Thomas before. So So we did that as an R&D project. Some of them went, and the fish did very well in the ponds. I was very pleased with that. Some of the fish went to Bugs Island, some of them went to Stanton River, some of them came here. So, the ponds and the way we're set up right now is not conducive to doing that. And we learned that this year. They won't come out. They won't go down into the drain kettle. They'll sit out there and flop in the mud before they come into that drain kettle. So I'm sitting there saying, this isn't good. And so we learned a lot this year. We did get a lot. We did get some fish out in the Smith Mountain Lake, some phase 2, what we call phase 2 fingerlings. Got them out in Bugs Island, we got them out in the Stanton River. If that program continues, we're gonna have to be making some modifications.
How old are those fish?
Those fish were spawned this past spring, and they went out in November.
Are those truck stocked? I mean, is that how you're putting them in the water?
We had to truck stock those because they were so large.
Yeah.
We were talking about fish like this.
And how do you decide where you're gonna stock them?
That's a biologist. I'm not.
You're just a hatchery man.
I just produce them. I just make them, okay? And they decide where to put them, okay? So we had some, I had a couple quarter pounders in there.
Their survival rate is increased the bigger they get and the older they get?
In the wild,
Yeah.
one would think that, but again, I am not the biologist. And you have to run a formal study for multiple years to be able to make that statement. So we may think that they do better, but we really don't know.
Do they predate each other at certain sizes or eat each other?
They're eating machines. As soon at 6 days of age, they're eating each other.
Oh, they are, that early.
Yeah. All the way up.
So Mike, I think the number we heard from Dan was, I think it was about 25,000 of those
Yes, sir.
phase 2s that were stocked.
Yes, sir.
I know there was a bit of a panic that hit a day or so after that stocking because there were some of them, the 1%ers or whatever that didn't make it. I think it maybe just a piece of feedback collectively between the club and
Yep.
Dan. I know we talked to Dan, but you should, let's make sure we have some communication going on there so that
Yeah,
when that hits, we can help manage the
yeah.
panic and chaos, because there's a fish kill going on, and well,
Yeah.
you get real world what will happen.
If we've done a stocking from the hatchery, you call me. If you don't like what happened, you call me, okay? Come directly to me. You don't have to go through a biologist or anybody else, you call me.
I
That's
think
my
the situation there,
value.
we didn't know about.
Understand, now you know.
Let me ask this question, and this is something that, again, we've got some numbers here, and we've got guys with bait tanks. Would stocking those second stage ones, if we had guys with bait tanks and several boats, and could you do that pelagically? Or how could we help in that, to get them off the shoreline again? Is that something that the club could help with?
I'm getting set up for that.
Okay.
Okay? And I appreciate the help, but the more, they're so sensitive, the more people I got involved in touching and handling, then the percent chances of them surviving drops, okay? I love y'all. I love for you to help, but there's a point that I have to say, yeah, I appreciate it, but if it's okay, let us handle it. We'll bring you on the boat to show you. I'm transparent. You can see what I do and ask me any question, right?
Absolutely.
So, but I appreciate the offer, but it would be better for us to handle it because of our setup that we're getting and the oxygen that we put in it, the aloe vera type compound that helps with the slime coat. Who's heard of slime coat?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a believer in that stuff, okay? And that helps out tremendously. The salt, it would help, I mean, we appreciate it.
Plus, you don't want him supervising you anyway, I can tell you.
I am not that bad, am I?
Hey, you went to the TMI, so you should be able to handle, if you're telling me that.
Oh, I could, I was talking about you.
Duly noted.
So, that kind of gives you a background of what we do. Lauren does, a lot of the truck stocking. I do most all of the pelagic stocking, but I'll probably be turning some of that over some. Once I get things, you know, the program developed and fine-tuned, and I can't do it all. I need, you know, good, capable, quality people like Lauren to help.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So there was a story going around about you probably, I don't know if it was 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that some of your workers didn't quite handle the stocking the way that you wanted them to handle it, and that you were less than pleased with them.
That's probably an understatement. Or just let it go. Just let it go. I don't leave that hatchery during the, do I leave the hatchery during the spawning season? I have a cot in the back that I sleep on. So that gives you any idea of how much blood and sweat and how I can be kind of passionate about this.
Can I get your address?
We appreciate it, we do, we really appreciate
Well,
it.
it's because of y'all that you allow me to do something I love doing. It really is. So, any questions?
Thank you for what you do.
Yes.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you,
Yes.
Thank you.
what you do.
Thank you.
I love what you do.
Thank you.
Do the fingerlings, live the pelagic lifestyle right away, or do they seek cover until they reach a larger size?
They're all over the place. They're eating machines. You know, if they've got a food base that's off from the shoreline, they're gonna be right in the thick of it. And if it's gonna be on the shoreline, they're gonna be right in the thick of it.
They're not like a bass or something
No.
that wants to hide in cover.
They don't relate.
And it's benefited by,
And you all know that it's an ambush predator anyway. And it's a schooling ambush predator, which makes it even double trouble. Okay? Any other questions about the production side on the hatchery?
Not the production side, but the truck stocking.
Yes, sir.
Have they tried electroshocking the area around the ramps to increase the productivity, you know, the truck stocking?
That's out of my realm.
Okay.
I like pelagic stock.
Used to put out, I don't know, there were like sample nets at the stocking sites to see what percent of the fish, do y'all still do that at all, or?
There were some reasons why, but that doesn't exist.
Not needed anymore?
No.
What were the 4 water quality parameters again that Lauren mentioned?
It's pH, alkalinity, hardness, and then ammonia, nitrogen. Technically, it's ammonia and nitrogen in one. Both kind of work together and are the same thing. They come from waste produced by the fish and possibly any excess feed that they might not eat.
Do you guys adjust the ponds, those parameters with chemicals and things? Additives?
Not with chemicals.
I mean, additives, let me rephrase that. Additives, not necessarily chemicals.
Fertilizer, we use
Yeah.
alfalfa meal, cottonseed meal, and liquid phosphate.
Because
We wanna get
you're
a
feeding
bloom.
all the plankton that way.
Yes, so what we have to do, we have to create a algal bloom, and then that feeds, the zooplankton that the babies eat. And also, believe it or not, that the zooplankton grazes on bacteria, and the bacteria grows on that alfalfa meal, okay? So we have to grow the food in the pond for the larvae to eat, okay? And Vic Thomas is, I mean, it's a tough place to get a pond to green up, and it never fails. The pond, we fight with it during the production season, and sure enough, 3 or 4 days before you want to harvest, the pond turns pea green. And I'm draining the pond. And I'm like, son of a love. Yeah, we have all kinds of issues in the ponds, so it's really tough.
What is required to provide you more ponds than the 6 you have? The state?
Well, it's gonna have to,
I mean, do you have the land down there?
no, It will not come from the agency, it will have to come from the legislature. A number of years ago, when was the new hatchery built?
That was, after the big flood, right?
93.
93, yep.
And that came from Mr. Vic Thomas, Senator Vic Thomas, put a piece of legislation through the legislature that gave money allocated to build the hatchery phase to get it out of the floodplain and put it up on a hill. Okay, and so that came through the legislature. Capital projects like that are really expensive, and the agency does not have that cash. Let me ask I'll get out of the hatchery. Who supports financially our agency?
Fish hunters and fishers.
Who doesn't support it?
State operating funds.
Taxpayers.
Taxes, yeah, taxes.
So y'all support that system. It doesn't come from, Loudoun County up there unless they're a fisherman, okay? So that's what I'm saying, you're my boss.
And
Okay.
using the roads up there, licenses and excise taxes.
Exactly. Exactly. So one thing I've been encouraging folks that may not be anglers, we have a, what do we have at Big Thomas that people love to do if they're not fishing? Besides, be nice.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
What do people like to use the river for?
To walk.
Protect the river.
Oh, the river?
The river.
To?
Float down.
Tubing.
To float.
Kayaks.
Kayaks.
Okay? So I go out of my way when I see a big group of kayakers out there, and I just pull over, I'm really nice, everybody thinks I'm on a game warden or something, and I don't wanna write them a ticket, and I just have a nice conversation. And they're not anglers, and they're using their resource, I'll get political here, they're using their resource, they came into it?
No, not contributing to it.
Okay. So I asked them, and I explained that our funds to even operate this boat ramp come from users, hunters and fishermen. And they said, most people don't know that. And I said, well, could I ask you, you like going on the river and you really enjoy that, did you have a good time today? And had across the board, it's always yes, yes, yes. I said, would you like to support us? And they said, well, how? I said, go buy a fishing license. I don't care if you fish. You don't have to fish, go buy a fishing license. Help us out. You're using the boat ramp here, you're using the river, even though you may never fish, or maybe you're opposed to fishing, but you can help us out by buying a fishing license. And some of them say, oh, and of course, you know what they say. Yeah, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna run out tomorrow and get one. So do that to people that you know that aren't anglers, encourage them. That's how you can get the general public to support us. Have them buy a fishing license, And better yet, have them buy a fishing license.
So then the wildlife management areas do something similar to that? We made it a law that in order to use a wildlife management area, you gotta have to have a boating license, a fishing, or hunting license. We don't know that in legislation.
Not there yet. And it comes down to simply, if we would like people to help fund what we're doing. I'm not a big tax person, by no means, but, it's just, to me, it seems kind of unfair that all this is on y'all's shoulders. And
That's
yet
what I'm getting at.
a lot of this is coming from non-users, okay? And that irritates me. To no end. Any other, I'll get off, back to the hatchery. Any other questions about?
Yeah, so when you had smaller tanks that you were using as breeding tanks, how many actual females are you normally breeding from if you're getting 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 eggs out of each one? Obviously, there's a mortality rate, but.
Right. Well, we're using about 40 females a year, what we use.
It's not that bad.
And, again, if you take that and you look at the males that I'm using, we don't use males twice, we only use them once. and I'm using about anywhere, it's probably averaging, probably close to 5 males to a female.
How do you tell a male striper from a female striper apart outside of when they're excited?
It's really difficult to look. It's really challenging to look at when they're, like in the winter time or late summer. I can usually hit it about 50-50 on it by looking at the vent and how the vent is formed. It's tough. You have to wait till they start getting into a little bit. Yeah.
That's almost like going in the bus terminal now, isn't it?
Pardon?
That's almost like walking in a bus terminal now.
Yeah.
You got a 50-50 chance you're gonna be right.
And, it doesn't really, it's not really applicable to you folks at Smith Mountain Lake. But what we do at the hatchery is, every single female gets a tag in her that I put in at the hatchery. It's pink, sorry, it's pink, and it has a number on it, okay? And that's a female number. That tag is placed in the dorsal fin at the top, and I don't pull it out. That fish goes back into the river. And you'll ask me, the next question is, well, if you're collecting 60 females, how many of those don't survive? I have a bad year if I lose 2. Okay? That's a bad
At the
year.
hatchery, at the hatchery or?
At the hatchery.
If
Have a bad year.
those then will stay in the river, they go work their way down into bugs. And
They get caught.
Whoever has bugs, is it Michelson?
Dan Williams.
Dan, does he get data then on the tax map?
Well, he just gets, I get a call from Dan saying, I've got a fisherman that caught this. And there's no we don't do, at the hatchery, we don't do length weight type data collection.
But you know that
It came from the hatchery.
Yeah.
So, came from the hatchery, they're getting caught back in the river, right? People catch them in the river, and then they're chewing up at Bugs Island. We do it with our walleye too, believe it or not, they're catching the walleye brood stock down at the face of the dam, at Carr Dam. They're catching those regularly.
And y'all put them in the stock?
Sir?
The walleye, you putting those in the stock also?
Yes, sir.
Not Smith Mountain, huh?
Yes, sir.
You don't put them in a Smith Mountain, do you?
No, sir.
That's a
biologist question.
There were several guys that banged him over the head several years ago about the walleye.
Maybe one last question. So you talked about not the issues of having help, and needing control of that. Are there resources, projects, tools that the club could help the hatchery with in terms of sponsoring in any fashion, whether it be fundraising or sourcing, or is there anything that we can help you with to make your jobs easier?
That's something, if you do a fundraiser, I don't even know if you can earmark it to the hatchery. I'm honest, I don't do it. I would love to be able to do that.
It needs to show up at the doorstep.
Yeah.
New Honda pump.
You need to bring a tractor over and dig another pond.
You know, nice
2 by
big,
4s.
yeah, and you know, all of a sudden it shows up at our gate. Oh, where'd that come from?
How about a blow-up mattress instead of that cot?
Yeah.
Get your blow-up mattress instead of the cot.
So the fish that we work, we place the tag in them. The males are blue and they have a number 2. Another thing, let me throw this out to you so you don't hear any wild rumors going around. We run a health program, a health assessment on the Stanton River Bugs Island striped bass to check for certain diseases. We don't have them. We're not talking about ectoparasites like the copepods. We're talking about viruses and bacteria. With that, I must euthanize 60 fish a year to do that survey, okay? And our veterinarian, our state veterinarian is in charge of that. We go out and collect the fish, and then she processes those fish for the tissues and the fluids that's necessary to submit for evaluation to make sure that population stays healthy. We want to try to get ahead of something instead of chasing behind it. okay? So just wanna let y'all know that. So if you hear that, oh my God, they're out there killing fish, well, we are doing health surveys, and it's 60 fish a year that we have to do. Guess what doesn't get sacrificed?
120 fillets.
Any female fish does not get sacrificed. Buddy, the males are expendable. Okay? And y'all,
Nothing new there.
that's true. Isn't that right? Males are expendable. So we do it primarily with the males. We don't do it with females. And we also run it, when we run walleye, we're doing the same thing with walleye. Except I don't have as many walleye that I can pick from, so the number's lower. But that fishery's coming along in the Stanton River. If you're not a walleye fisherman, I understand you're missing out on something. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not a fisherman, I'm here with a friend that takes me fishing.
Okay.
But it surprised me that you, one, we're expendable, I got that part, but it takes 5 of us for every one female, I think you said, in the breeding process.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the deer at my house, and there's 1 buck and 20 females. What's wrong with these fish?
If it doesn't have scales, I don't know.
No, does it take 5, I mean, do you have 5 different,
Who's been on
groups of eggs?
Who's been on the Stanton River during a spawn? What happens out there?
They busted.
Is it 1 fish, 2 fish?
Oh, no, it's a big boy.
30, 40 fish.
Yes.
And that's with 1 girlie.
That's right.
Okay?
They're not interested in eating these, are they?
No, actually, when they start doing that, if you're very fortunate, you can watch it. If you got a big pod of males, they'll actually push her up
Yeah,
at the
she'll be in the
surface,
middle of it.
almost out of the water.
Jump into it.
Underneath it. Okay, it's that many. And so the reason we do it at the hatchery is to try to make sure that we do no harm genetically. Okay?
Okay, so they all impregnate then, you hope?
Not all the males. Some of the males, how long is the milk, the sperm vital on the fish?
14 days?
No, in the water, once it hits water.
Oh, not even seconds.
7
It don't
seconds.
last that long?
7 seconds. Motility of sperm of the fish is about 7 to 10 seconds, and that's it.
I had always thought this, I don't know, it was just, but I thought the process of it was for those, I guess when she hatches the eggs out correctly, and in real life, I'm in Staunton River, and I seen that, you got that 1 female and 2 or 3, look like 100, it looks like it, got males all over top of her, and just rolling constantly like this right here. And I guess those eggs just, they rotate down through the river along with that sperm, and that's what fertilizes.
Well, remember, it's only like 7 seconds.
7 seconds, I didn't
7
know
seconds.
like that.
And so she's not, naturally, she's not just blowing everything and it's done.
Right.
So she's squirting, there'll be a squirt of eggs come out, you get a lot of activity, and then another big squirt of eggs come out, another squirt of eggs come out. So it's kind of a continuous thing, but she's done probably within 2 minutes or less.
What time of year does that take place?
Water temperature. It has a lot to do with it. Water temperature.
Mid-April.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things going on in a natural spawn. Is water temperature's 1, but it's not the most critical one. It's photoperiod. Okay?
Daylight.
They have a pineal gland in their brain that regulates the hormones. Okay? When there's a certain ratio of daylight to nighttime, that's when those ovaries start to mature. Now, the water temperature can either increase it or it can slow it down. But it's primarily a function of daylight. Okay? All animals are like that.
Yeah. So the Stanton River is mid-April.
It starts about mid-April. Typically, it's mid-April to about the mid-May.
Mid-May, yep.
And you'll get groups of fish coming up. And usually what happens, early in a run, you'll get all the bucks come up. And they kind of hang around at the buck bar. And they wait for the girls to come up. And you'll get some early spawners come up. They'll do their thing fall off, go back, those bucks will hang around. Some more girls will come up because they're maturing at different times over a couple week period. So you'll get influxes of females running up stream, but the bucks will stay right there. They'll hang in, and you'll get some late running bucks come up also.
Now, I got a question.
Yes.
Now, we're talking about that, I mean, and we're landlocked at Smith Mountain.
Uh-huh.
So the fish can't get upstream far enough to be able to do the fertilization process.
Roanoke.
But can they go up far enough to the Roanoke to do that? I know because.
They'll go up there and spawn, but it doesn't mean, the egg has to be suspended for how long? 44 hours.
44 hours, okay.
So what happens is, if that egg drifts down and then starts to settle out into the mud, then it's not a bite. Yeah, it got fertilized and there was a spawning activity, but it's not gonna hatch.
Because not enough current?
That's a current, and really at Brookneal, we're, number one, we're at a fall line, okay? And number two, those eggs can stay in suspension long enough until the current is low enough that they'll settle out before they hit Bugs Island. So that's why there's such a good spawning run on the Stanton River. And it's not to say that there's not spawning going on the Roanoke. Not gonna say that,
Right.
but what I'm saying is, the eggs will probably not be viable because they can't stay in suspension long enough.
Gotcha. So what was it?
Who's fished the upper Roanoke?
Everybody.
Were fish running up there?
Never any.
Yeah, they used to.
No
You can
fish.
see them, you can see them spawn up the lake. Understand something, you're in a room full of fishermen, and you just ask the fishermen, do the fish go up the Roanoke? He lied to you, yeah, they go up there, but anyway, just kidding.
Yeah, so you know they're going up there, and you know that they're following a natural instinct to spawn. It's just a question, will the eggs be viable? Would that spawn be viable and produce?
So they-
The answer is probably no. Will something survive? God has a way of making stuff
Right.
survive.
It's possible, but it's, I
It's
mean,
possible, but it's
unlikely.
Higher water flow than normal, so they can drift longer period of time, possibly, it could happen.
and then they hit the lake and
Yeah.
they drop out.
Yeah.
Because that bedrock area is completely silt.
Because remember, what was the one thing I shared with y'all, how sensitive they are,
Yeah.
okay? So they have to, that egg is even more sensitive, so it has to be just right, okay? One more question, and you probably want me to be quiet.
No, I'm here as long as you are.
One more question.
So Mike, I'm gonna ask you a question about the river.
Okay.
So what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, the fish that, these guys probably don't know, but the eggs that hatch at Cat Rock are more likely to live or reproduce than the eggs that hatch down on the below Clarkson Bridge where I fish at. Is that a fair statement?
That is probably a pretty fair statement. That's probably a pretty fair statement, because there's spawn up there at Brookneal Catwalk, and the flow is such that they probably hatched out before they get down to Clover and all. They've already hatched out.
Gotcha.
And they can stay in suspension. And then once they hatch out, then, you know, the larvae are still, they're called pro-larvae. They still are, they drift, they don't swim, and they start to be able to swim when they're about 3 days. When they're about 3 days old, that larvae can start to swim and kind of hold itself up in the water column. Okay? Other than that, they'll sink down and then pop up, and then sink down and pop up. At about 3 days, they'll be able to start maintaining themselves in a water column. And at 5 days, they're jetting around all over the place trying to eat each other.
Question for one of our online stream
Sure.
viewers. He was kind of tying back to the spawn and time and photo period and so forth. He was asking, does moonlight have any effect?
Yes, it
like
does.
full moon?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah, we go through the fall spawn, if you finish with that. We go through the fall spawn here in the lake, I mean, like I said, we know they're not able to reproduce landlocked in.
Yeah.
What would be your theory as to why, I mean, we all have theories as to why they go into certain areas, maybe they're in Craddock Creek this weekend and going through the fall spawn ritual. Next year, they may be around the corner down toward the Keys, where it used to be the Keys at one time, and everybody's heard the story from the guy that comes from California that stocked his own personal fingerlings in the lake and so forth, so
From
forth.
California?
It's,
We need to
look,
get his
you-
name.
You like
They wanna know who that is.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I mean, you hear all kinds of things, but
I know.
at one time, you could go around the Keys, when you pulled around the corner, and you looked in there during the April time of year,
You can walk on.
you could walk from one bank to the other bank
Yep.
and never touch the water.
Yep.
There'd be so many boats.
Yep.
But so what's your thought process as far as why those fish go back to those certain areas? Is it because they were more than likely stocked there? Or is it
No.
because of just the temperature, water
No,
temperature?
stripers don't imprint like salmon
Okay.
do, not as strong.
Right.
Now, we've done, the biologists have done some trials, and of course, the fish come out of Bugs Island, you know, Carter Reservoir, and they come up, and they turn right or they turn left, okay? Now, they actually run some tests where they put some tags in, and they were tracking those fish, and they found the fish that they tagged up around Brookneal went all the way back, went back up the Dan River. Cause he said, that's not fun up there. People are electrocuting me and they're putting stuff in my body. It's like an out of alien experience. I don't wanna go back. And so he went up the dam. And they've had the same thing happen. Fish in the dam come down, turn around, go up the Stanton. So they're not as strong on their imprinting as like a salmon that goes up a particular creek, right? And like in Alaska, how they do that. So they imprint to a degree, but it's not the same strength as a salmon.
Okay, so what do you think it would?
It's probably bait.
Okay.
Food.
It's the
Probably
food
bait.
source is gonna probably be there more so than
Yeah.
anything
And the
else.
in the fall, they're really, in the late summer and fall, they're not even thinking about spawning. I mean, that's so far down, that's bait, that's all bait driven.
Right. Well, I'm talking about during the, right, in the spring of the year when they do.
On the spring of the year.
When they doing this, the spawning, what causes them to come into certain areas?
Sally
We
was
all got
over
our
there,
own
so
periods.
Buck and Charlie are gonna follow them.
So, I used to fish up in the very back of the Roanoke River.
Yeah.
And where, the bridge for the parkway comes across the river. And I fished up there for many years, around April, May, and at night catching stripers that were up there just busting. And that's up above where Back Creek comes into the Roanoke River, it's way upriver.
Yeah.
And, lately, and I say lately, within the 5 or 6 years, they're not up there anymore. So I attributed that back then, probably the stocking was going on around the bridge area or up in that area to bring them back in there every year.
We will go up, Mormons, we stock out of Mormons.
Okay.
So we get up in that upper realm, of the Roanoke. The biologist, prefers to do down lower.
Yeah.
So I can't explain why. It
But-
could be a function of flow, it could be, it's probably primarily flow.
I believe that's what it was, and there's just not enough length there
Yeah.
to tumble that egg
No,
that
there's not.
long. It runs out there by Back Creek, it starts coming into the
You need
creek
40 to
parts.
60 miles of river.
Yeah, and this is,
40 to 60 is what you need. You know, if it's shorter than that, then probably the flow's too low and it sinks out into the mud. And then, so you need a minimum, the literature says a minimum of like 40 miles of river. Okay? All right, well, I appreciate y'all's patience and understanding and tolerating.
Thank you.